Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So I'm now going to be rash enough to make my election forecast for the presidential election in the United States tomorrow. Um, so I remember seeing that Michael Moore, that well-known left-wing activist, saying the Republican Party is dead. It's going to go the way of the Whigs, party which disappeared in the 1850s in the United States. Well, I think rumours of the Republican Party's death are much exaggerated, although I do believe they're going to lose tomorrow, the White House and the Senate and the House of Representatives. I still think they'll be a formidable force. They could well regain the White House probably next time, but you cannot write their political obituary. The idea the party is going to disappear in the next few years, even the next few decades, I think is far-fetched. One swallow does not a summer make. So Trump is going to lose, but not by much. He is an anarch, but he's campaigned on law and order despite having incited violence repeatedly at his rallies, despite just a few days ago having publicly praised attempted murder when some of his supporters tried to ram the car of people they thought were Democrats, and loads of things like that. Constantly speak up for white supremacists, terrorists, and so on. Who's done everything he can to denigrate the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security, law enforcement in general, who's constantly disobeyed subpoenas, and he is supposed to be the champion of law and order. Well, if it's against non-whites, brutality against non-whites, that's law and order. Questioning him, he thinks, is an outrageous intrusion on civil liberties. So he's someone who's utterly egomaniacal and despicable and hypocritical, self-contradictory. But the Republican base, they lap that up. Some of them think that malice and cruelty is toughness, when what's really tough is to actually be humane. Anyway, so his unique degree of malignity is going to sink him. But the shocking thing is not that he's going to lose, but he's going to lose by not very much. This mephitic man, I mean, I would love to see him detained in Supermax the rest of his life. Trouble is, it's not going to happen. I don't think he's even going to be arrested. There we go. So the pundits are really united. There's a consensus that Donald Trump is going to lose. Opinion polls saying about 8%. That's polar polls. I think a bit less like that, like say 6% of the popular vote. Of course, it's not the popular vote that actually counts. It's the Electoral College. So I know 270 is the magic number. I think Biden will get about 290. So there's the blue wall states that he needs to take back: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I forecast he'll take back all three, but again, by quite thin margins. Trump got those three crucial states by about 84,000 votes in total. It was a staggeringly wafer-thin margin. So I think that Biden will also retake North Carolina, and crucially Florida, which is almost a bellwether state. There are four big states for the purpose of the Electoral College. Well, so they're New York, California, Texas, and Florida. That's in no particular order. So it's almost impossible to win without at least two of those four. If you win three of those four, you're almost guaranteed. And if you win four of those four, well, really, you are. I mean, it's a very long time, probably since 1988, that anyone won all four of those. Anyway, so Biden, he might even lose a state or two that the Democrats won last time. So long as it's a fairly small one, then he doesn't have that much to worry about. So I think that the Democrats will retake the Senate, but only up to 51 senators. So there are only 100 in the Senate, so they would still have the majority. But, there'll be a couple of independents there as well, so Republicans will be a little bit down. So it's always quite tight in the Senate. I mean, nobody's won by miles, not for decades, like winning, say, 70 senators. But you might know the Senate is 1/3 renewing each time. So there are only 33 or 34 senators up for election every 2 years, which is why you can't have that much of a wave in the Senate. Because supposing 32 senators are up for re-election, and half of them are Democrats, 16, and half of them are Republicans, 16. Even if the Republicans lost all 16 of those, the Democrats, they'd be up into the low 60s. But anyway, that's never happened that someone's taken that many in one go. Voter suppression is going to be somewhat successful. Republican-dominated states, they've closed hundreds of polling stations, making it more difficult to vote, more time-consuming, more expensive. People have to pay to drive further, wait longer to cast their ballots, doing everything they can to frustrate people in their attempt to exercise their constitutional rights. So this is a concerted effort to deprive people of their uh, liberties, because as Republicans have been very frank about this. Donald Trump openly said a few weeks ago that if people vote in large numbers, no Republican would ever win again, which I don't think is quite true, but there is a degree of truth in it. And then Trump and the Republican Party have really got their excuses in early. They believe they're going to lose, which is why they're constantly saying, oh, we can't trust postal votes, they've got to be discounted. Now, postal voting has been going on since the 19th century, and I'm never aware of a time when there's been a significant number of bogus votes cast in the post, or indeed posts which are discounted. So they're doing everything they can to sow doubt on this issue. And if Trump loses, as he probably will, there'll be a significant number of people who don't accept that. Remember, 46% of votes were cast for him last time. Half of those are fanatical Trumpists, and some of these Trumpist zealots will not accept that their man is lost. And it's a dangerous situation. He's told his militias to stand by, that they should go there to inspect the polling stations, go there armed to frighten people off. Some people were too scared to vote, especially the ethnic minority, the visible minority. There's a high chance you're going to vote Democrat. You might well be frightened of what these people are going to do to you, because Trump is very open about his links with neo-Nazis. He has spoken warmly about white supremacists protesting in favor of a pro-slavery statue in Charlottesville, Virginia, a general who fought to deprive African Americans of fundamental human rights. He thinks this person should be honored in the public square. Who wouldn't bring himself to say a single critical word of the Ku Klux Klan, despite savaging other people for the mildest thing, for just not completely agree with him, who really openly courts xenophobia every day, is very scornful of women who dare ask him worthwhile questions. But this impresses some people. That's machismo, according to some people. This sort of rebarbative and misogynistic behavior. So voting in person, well, tends to favour the grand old party more than vote in person than vote by post. Democrats are slightly the other way. So on election day, there are probably more Republican ballots cast. Those may well be the first ones counted after the polls close. So the initial result might look quite more favourable to the Republicans. And no doubt Trump will seize them and say, look, I've won, that's it, I've won, and concede Biden and make it absolutely clear. So Biden is going to be smart enough not to do that. And then the result will come through the next few days. Last time, even though Trump actually lost the popular vote, him winning the Electoral College is actually quite clear early on. But partly because of coronavirus, there's a higher level of postal voting than ever. 94 million people have already voted, which is an astonishing number. But that doesn't look good for the Republicans, who desperately want to reduce turnout. Now, Trump, by being so contentious, he got himself a name in the old days, but he's such a polarizing figure that it's hard not to have an opinion on him, which may well redound to his disadvantage, because he's actually actuated his opponents to vote. Whereas if he'd been more vanilla, then not so many people would have bothered to vote. So it is true that the Republican Party is in long-term demographic decline, but the rapidity and the severity of this shouldn't be overstated. Whites without a degree are 43% of the American population. Trump scored 46% of the popular vote last time. So the two figures are very close. So the whites will be a minority by 2045. But in a quarter of a century of time, even if the rate of going to third level education remains the same, that 43% of working class whites, I think anyone without a degree is working class, even though they're often fooled into believing they're bourgeois, that 43% won't be that high, working class whites, or they'll be lower, significantly lower, like say 33%. But they're not going to go much below that, even in the longer term. And so if Republicans are polling 3 percentage points above that base, that working class whites, 36%, it's really impossible to win the Electoral College like that, or the Senate. It would have to be such an extraordinarily efficient distribution of the votes for them to win that it's hard to see that happening. So they're going to have to significantly reach out to communities that have traditionally not voted for them in serious numbers. Now, of course, some working class whites vote Democrat. There used to be a lot more who did. Some vote for minor parties, and plenty don't vote at all. So the older you are, the more educated you are, the wealthier you are. These things are often related. the more likely you are to vote at all. Not saying favour which party. Anyway, the Republican Party may be running out of whites because if it was only whites who were allowed to vote, then the Republicans would win every time. And no wonder the Republican Party is nostalgic for the Jim Crow era, certainly when in the South only whites could vote, or some of them for the slavery era, when only whites could vote, on white males indeed. Because white males, over 60% of them vote for the Republican Party. If it's white males without a degree, it's about 75%. But if you're a white male without a degree but with guns and you're a churchgoer, it's very high. It'd be about 90%, especially if you're rural and on and on. So anyway, so I predict Trump is going to lose. There'll be legal battles. The wrangling will go on for about a month. It's got shades of the year 2000 when George W. Bush won the presidency not by 500 votes in Florida, but by a solitary vote in the Supreme Court. And of course, there are, I think, 6 Republican-appointed justices on the Supreme Court. The Democrats must be kicking themselves they didn't manage to persuade Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire when Obama could have replaced her with someone whom the Democrats would find more amenable. So I think Trump will eventually have to go, and I think the Republican senators and so on, the grandees in the party will abandon him, realize in the long term they need to get rid of him. It's not going to look good for them. There may well be serious violence because he's really riled up his supporters, rallied his troops, as it were, and there are a lot of foam-flecked bigots who hang on his every word, who believe his lies no matter how utterly flagrant, or his rambling rants no matter how incoherent they are. So eventually he's going to have to leave on the 20th of January. I really would like him to see legal consequences, to face jail time, but sadly I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, the people said the smart thing for him to do would be to resign, and then Pence take over for the last 2.5 months, and Pence pardon him and loads of his cronies and Confederates in all his criminal enterprises. But anyway, I think Trump will just not shut up because he's got logorrhea these days, or carry on with more verbal diarrhea and racist screeds. So be a bit of a backseat driver, constantly castigating the Republican Party for being wimpish. But I see a sort of civil war in the Republican Party, not in the literal sense, but they'll be at each other's throats, recriminating over Trump. There'll be the Trumpists and those who regret him, and those who never wanted him in the first place, and they would really like to move on for Trump because ultimately he lost for them. But it might be difficult, him just not shutting up. So the lessons they should learn, the Republican Party: Trump never again. I've got to say, he wasn't that dreadful for them. He did win once, and when otherwise it might have been difficult. They might have had a blander character who have been less controversial, who may well have lost. I mean, Hillary was a very flawed candidate. I know she had something to say for her. She certainly had experience. She's intelligent. Maybe being a woman might be an advantage. Being white is an advantage, clearly, because look, of all the presidents and vice presidents put together, over 99% have been white. So anyway, Republicans have got to think to the long-term future, try and reach out, persuade more Hispanic people, more African Americans to vote for them. And they've had limited success with that already. More gay people, maybe more people in urban areas is going to be a bit more bit difficult for them. And those who are not just religious maniacs. Asian Americans, quite a small community, maybe 6%, but they're growing. They're disproportionately youthful. You look into the demographics. The fertility rate in the United States is about 1.7, whites significantly below that, about 1.5%, whereas Hispanics are significantly above that, about 2.2%, African Americans about 1.8%, and Asian Americans about 1.7%. So all the other ethnic groups are growing as whites are declining. So religiosity is declining a little bit. Not sure about gun ownership, but gun ownership obviously tends to favor Republicans. And maybe the demographic spread, the concentration of the population, because the census, when that's updated, you see, population shift, have to allot more representatives to this state and deduct them from another state. So that's my musings. I think that Joe Biden is going to win. Now, I desperately want to see him win. I'm very cautious. I'm trying to guard against wishful thinking. There's a danger I might delude myself. Sometimes I think, it's hard to be too pessimistic because good things almost never transpire and dreadful things often occur.
So there we are. It'll be a trepidatious evening for me as I watch the results filter in. What do you think? Well, please support me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and so on. Toodaloo.